A sign-up sheet has been passed around. If everyone had an opportunity to sign in. Okay. We'll move on to item C, approval of agenda. Any questions or comments on the agenda? If not, then we hear a motion to approve.
Make motion.
Motion, second. All in favor, state saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Approved. Public comments. Any public comments at this time? Moving on to old business, there is none. So we'll move on into new business. And we have Mr. Stephen Thompson with us today. Many of y'all may know Mr. Thompson did a wage study for the city. That's a few study. Mr. Thompson, if you would, sir.
Just outside. Clicker. All right. Give that one second. All right, I'm set. Hey, glad to be here. Appreciate the opportunity to meet with you again and talk about compensation. I was asked to kind of come and give you an overview of our process. So that's my plan today, is to talk about kind of in generic terms what we typically do for a pay study. Most of which we did for you folks back in 2021 timeframe. But I'll kind of go through our generic process first, and then I'll talk at the end a little bit how it was slightly modified for, made a couple different changes for Shelbyville. Probably the best way to do this is if you have kind of generic questions about what I'm talking about, jump in right at the time that the question comes to mind, rather than wait till the end because you'll forget. But if you have any Shelbyville specific questions about why did you do this or why did you do that, let's hold those off until the end. We may cover some of that before we get to those questions. So anyway, when we do our pay studies, we're really trying to answer two questions. What's the value of each job to the city of Shelbyville? And then once we figure that out, how should employee salaries be adjusted? So remember, those are the two overarching questions. So our process is, in a nutshell, is this. We do some planning kinds of things, met with, at that time, Shanna and city manager, and talked about where the city wanted to be relative to the market, who the competitors were, and that kind of thing. What kind of pay plan we're looking for, steps, ranges. What did you have now? Was it working? Was it not working? And then kind of go from there. Second thing up here, I won't talk a lot about this. I'll mention it further into the presentation, but job analysis. Our approach is market driven. So we value jobs. Remember the first question is how do we value jobs? We value jobs based on how they're valued in the marketplace. We don't do subjective evaluation and assign points to jobs for know-how and problem solving, accountability, working conditions, all that kind of stuff. I've done those plans. They're kind of fun, but they're kind of cumbersome and hard to explain. So our approach, we don't do that in general. Jobs are valued like they're valued in the marketplace. So it's really important for us to make sure we understand the jobs in the city of Shelbyville. As you might remember, and it's even more true now, this is what I do. I do public sector stuff, city and county governments, public utilities. Occasionally I'll do a for-profit, work for a for-profit client, but by and large, 100% of the work right now is city and county government. So I kind of know what each person does in government, but yeah, each city's a little bit different. The smaller you get, more likelihood is that people will wear multiple hats because you don't have a lot of people, so you have the same people doing multiple jobs in a way. And so the distribution of hats sometimes differs from city to city too. So it's important for us to make sure we understand the jobs. So we did that. I can't remember if we had employees fill out job questionnaires. Sometimes we do that. But we definitely make sure we get the job descriptions and understand the jobs. Usually meet with department heads up front, and the focus of the discussion is the jobs in each department to make sure, from the department head's perspective, what each person does, issues they might have relative to compensation for particular jobs, those kinds of things. So we try to make sure we understand the jobs. That's the basis of this whole thing, is we make sure we understand the jobs, so we match it to the market data for apples and apples comparisons. Okay, so then we do the market data, collect the market data, establish the value of the jobs, then we define or develop the employee salary adjustments. Sometimes we work with the city pay policy if there's things that need to be changed or added, and then assist in implementation. All right, so what's the value of each job? One of the very first things we mentioned at the planning phase, we define a strategy for the city. Do you want to be a market average? Do you want to be above average? Do you want to be below average? That's a decision that you all have to make. By definition, most cities choose to be average, but occasionally we have some clients that definitely want to be above average. And occasionally we'll have one that, because they have a super duper benefits package, wage and salaries can be a little bit below average and their total package is good. So we have an occasional client that looks at it that way. But that's defining the pay strategy. Where do you want to be as far as market position? And then actually creating the pay plan. These are the administrative guidelines that make real how you value the jobs. Okay, so create this pay plan. So first we mentioned compiling market data. We almost always get data from two sources: a set of public sector benchmarks, which you all would get to select. These are usually comprised of your direct labor market competitors, the cities and counties right around Shelbyville. But there are also maybe some other cities that are very similar in terms of demographics, population, pay philosophy, distance from metropolitan area, et cetera, that would be good matches for Shelbyville, and we put those in the mix too. We usually end up with a set of about 12 to 15 benchmark cities and counties to serve as the labor market competitors. We also have a general business and industry database. Most of the time, when somebody leaves your employment, much of the time, they're not going to go to another city or county government. They're going to go work for an employer or distribution company or a manufacturer or retail or bank or whatever. So we do get data for representing general business and industry for the general area here, and try to match each of your jobs to a job in that database as well. So for most jobs, we have these two data points there: the public sector market rate and the general business market rate. One exception is certified public service, certified fire and fire suppression folks, and then certified police officers are not in the general business database, but everything else is. So we can usually match almost every job to each of those two databases. Any questions on that so far? Okay. So we got this data. Now we need to create a plan, like I said, establishing the value of these jobs based on this market data, and then establishing the pay opportunity, if you will, for employees at Shelbyville based on how we value the jobs relative to the market. So we usually do this by setting up jobs in pay grades with pay steps or pay ranges. So jobs are assigned to a pay grade, and then each pay grade has a set of steps, maybe 12, 15 steps, or in some cases we just have a pay range with a minimum, a maximum. That's our pay plan, if you will. It sets the guidelines for administering pay. As far as pay grades, kind of deeper dive into the setting up the pay plan. Pay grades, the big question is, how many grades do we have? The more grades you have, the closer they are. And in my mind, it's more difficult to defend his job as 17 or 18. Whereas if you have fewer grades, greater difference between the grades, it should become a little bit more intuitive that this job is a 6 and this is a 7. And instead of 30 grades, you have maybe 13. So it's clear to most people where jobs kind of stack up within their department. Whereas if you have lots and lots of grades, it's tough, and you tend to have grade inflation because people want to have higher grades. So anyway, but how many grades you have is one of the questions we have to answer. And then setting up the pay ranges or steps. I mentioned, where do you want to be relative to the market? Do you want to be at the average, a little bit above, a little bit below? Where do you set the starting rate of pay? I usually suggest we start at 85% of market. That market rate, by the way, represents somebody with 5 to 7 years of experience in the job. So most employers don't hire at that rate because a brand new person doesn't know where the bathrooms are, not very productive for a while. So they usually hire them about 80 to 85% of the market rate, and then move them up to the market rate within 4, 5, 6 years. That's the plan anyway. So we usually set the starting rate somewhere around 85% of the market rate for the job. And then how much is there, how much of a spread from the minimum to the maximum? Generally speaking, that tends to be about 20, 25% at a minimum, but usually closer to 50% from min to max. And then if we're gonna have steps instead of ranges, how big should the steps be? Should it be 2%, 2.5%, 3%, 3.5%? We get a lot of feedback from you folks on what you're comfortable with. In some ways, you could view the steps as being a commitment. We're going to fund these, and it's in black and white. So you all would take a look at that and say, okay, I guess we better do this. So there's an element of commitment there. Of course, you don't have to do that. You know, affordability is a big question, and if you can't afford to do the steps, you don't. But employees are sometimes more comfortable with steps. Here's the plan. Here's where I'm supposed to be at year 10. And they're more comfortable with that than just open ranges where you guys can do whatever you want, according to the employee. So, but anyway, steps or ranges, we work with both. And then, try to put this all together. So usually we set up the pay plan so that if it's a pay range, you have a minimum, a midpoint, and a max. The midpoint reflects the market rates from the jobs, the market average or whatever position you choose. That's the midpoint. And then the minimum is representing the starting rate for a minimally qualified person. The max is the top out. If you have steps, we usually have one step designated as the market step. Maybe it's typically be step 5, step 6, or step 7. That is equated to the market rate for the jobs from the data. And depending on how many steps you have and how big the steps are, that kind of dictates how fast you can go from starting rate to the market rate. Again, ideally, we'd like it to be around 5, 6, 7 years. You know, if it takes longer than that, you're behind the game. So, any questions on the pay plan? We're not talking about anything about employee salaries yet. We're just talking about the guidelines for administering pay. Okay? All right. Yes.
I've seen 2 different sheets. One of them seems to do the range, the midpoint, and then the other one's got steps. So
yeah. So when
we're actively doing the range right now. Is that correct?
Yes. When he did the pay study back in 2020, I think is when it was finalized. Moving forward, when we first implemented in 2021, we did the step, and then after that, each year, all I've been doing is updating that pay range that was provided with the COLAs.
And Josh, the former city manager, wanted to go from steps to ranges, right? Or was it the opposite way?
I believe it was the steps.
Yeah. So anyway, there are 2 versions of stuff floating around out there, I'm sure. So anyway, and whether you do steps or ranges, that's your call. I'd say 60% of our clients use steps, 40% use ranges. There's advantages and disadvantages to each. We can talk about that if you want, but that's entirely your call. Anyway, one of the questions is, okay, we got this pay plan with grades and steps or ranges. How do we get the jobs into the pay plan? Again, further focusing on the value of the jobs to the city of Shelbyville. So generally speaking, we assign the jobs to the pay grade based on the market data with some input from city management. So usually we'll put the job in the pay grade for which the midpoint, whatever the market step is, step 6, whatever. We put it in the job, in the pay grade for which that market step or pay range midpoint most closely matches the market average for the job. Okay? So again, the midpoint of the pay range, step 6 or whatever that market step is, supposed to represent the market average. So jobs are assigned to the pay grade for which that market rate for the job most closely matches the midpoint or the market step, 6 maybe, of the pay plan. Okay? Now, that is reviewed with management. Usually when we do this, I mentioned meeting with the department heads up front. We usually meet with the department heads at somewhere in this point where we show, okay, here's where the jobs are falling, and does this make sense to you that the jobs are rated in these grades like this, and get feedback. So sometimes there's some tweaking going on. Usually it's a result of us not understanding completely the nature of the job. So we have matched it inappropriately to the two databases. And so we'll talk, okay, we got the wrong job match. So we'll go back and match it to a more appropriate, a better match in each database. That usually results in the job going up a grade or down a grade, which is typically what the department heads are looking for. Once in a while, we'll push back and say, no, I mean, if we look at the data, that doesn't support you moving this job up here or down here. So there may be some other reasons, and sometimes there are. But generally, we try to focus everything back to make it objective and fair to everybody. Try to focus it back to the job content, making sure we match everything appropriately. Once in a while, we'll have a study where they value a certain function or department more than the market kind of does, and there may be some jobs that, okay, fine, we'll push them up a little bit because they can explain to me, yeah, here's the reasons why. This is important to the city, maybe not as important over here, so we need to pay a little bit more to get a better qualified person than most of the people in our city benchmarks. Doesn't happen very often, once in a while. So again, we're trying to ensure that we're externally competitive. And again, with this internal equity, like I said, we do meet with department heads and the city manager and finance and HR, try to make sure we get the jobs in the right pay grades so that it makes sense. That all the jobs, if people are doing the same work in one department, that job should be valued the same if they're doing the same work in another department. Those two jobs should be valued the same. And sometimes the data, like quirks in the data or whatever, it's close, but they fall in different grades. And we'll say, no, that doesn't make sense. So with your help, we'll say, we can need to put those two jobs in the same pay grade. Any questions on that? Okay. All right, now, so we got the pay plan, we got the jobs and the grades, we got pay steps or pay ranges for all the jobs. Now we need to figure out what we're going to do with employee compensation. So typically there's 3 things we do. First of all, if it's pay ranges, everybody at least has to be at the minimum. If it's steps, we have to get everybody on a step. And so that entails some sort of adjustment to get to the nearest step. Closest step, but not less. We don't take money away. So people would go to the step that's closest to their current rate of pay, but not less. Then once we got everybody in the pay plan, implementing the pay plan, so to speak, then we usually recommend some sort of a general increase based on what's going on in the marketplace. And occasionally, if the client is really behind, how much catch up do they want to do to kind of move things closer to where they want them to be? I threw up here just for reference right now, as far as market trend goes, the latest December CPIU, 2.2% inflation rate. That's part of the equation. But the more important numbers, what are employers doing with respect to inflation and market, everything else? And that's about and the projection for this next year is 3.5%. That's a national number. It's projecting that overall, all industries, all locations in the U.S., or this is the Southeast actually, employers are projecting to adjust wages and salaries for all reasons, merit, COLA, everything, 3.5% for next year. Now I will say, Middle Tennessee has kind of been different because Nashville and all the stuff going on in Franklin and Nashville and Murfreesboro, it's just crazy. So that's probably closer to 4 in Middle Tennessee. We have some cities who will probably do a little bit more than that, trying to catch up still some. But generally, that's kind of the market trend you're looking at. So again, we focus on what employers are trying to do. That's what you need to match. If you only do 2% and employers are doing 3.5%, you're going to fall behind. When we had, what was it that one year, 8% inflation or something, employers, most part, we're not doing 8% increases. They were doing maybe 6. So you need to match that 6 to kind of keep pace. All right, so we do this general increase. Then sometimes we'll do a one-time, work with the client to develop a scheme for a one-time tenure adjustment. Oftentimes when we do these, it's become apparent that over time, the relationship between pay and time and job has been eroded, so that people who were hired last month are making about the same as somebody who was hired 3 years ago. That's a problem. For most people, that's a problem. So we usually come up with some sort of scheme where we spread people out a little bit based on tenure. This is intended to be a one-time adjustment. Once we get it right, we don't have to come back anymore. From then on, the 3.5%, whatever we're doing, should take care of everything. But to fix that anomaly at the beginning of the pay study, where people of different tenure are making about the same rate of pay, this is an attempt to fix that. How much you can fix is often a budget thing. I'll get back to that question here with Shelbyville. Budget did impact how we try to do that this year in 2020. So how much of this tenure-based adjustment you can do is often constrained by budget. It can be pretty expensive. We've done some clients where, 2/3 of the people get an adjustment based on this, and we've done some where it's 10%. Everything is okay in terms of how pay is related to time and job. We will look at time with the city as a second factor, sometimes the only factor, but in our mind, I think most would agree that time and job is the most important factor. If you've got a sergeant in the police department that's been a sergeant for 5 years, that's probably more important than a sergeant who was promoted yesterday, even if that person has 10 years with the department. They're brand new sergeants. So most people would think there should be some distance between those two people in terms of pay. Anyway, any questions on that? Okay. Then the second part of the creating the pay plan is looking at the pay policy. A lot of times issues are not so much how much you pay, it's how you pay. So starting rates of pay, what do you do for promotions or demotions, light duty, transfers, whole process of annual pay increases, pay for certifications often comes up here. We do about those kinds of things. It's all part of the pay policy, so we help clients update their pay policy. All right, any questions on any of that stuff? All right, let's talk about Shelbyville and specifically 2020. This is a set of public sector benchmarks that we used for the city and for the pay study. Again, this is intended to be your direct labor market competitors who are typically close by. And we also have a couple out there, Cleveland, Cookeville, maybe Maryville, that are good matches in terms of population and demographics and seem like would be useful comparators for Shelbyville. Again, this is totally your call what you want in here. If we were to do this pay study again, I would say, hey, you want to add or delete this list? We're open to that. Nashville's not in here. You're maybe far enough removed from Nashville where you don't need it in here. Columbia, Spring Hill probably has to have Nashville in their market comparators. But I don't know what would be missing here. Murfreesboro, kind of close, but I don't know. So anyway, those are all decisions you'll have to make. I mentioned the market rate is the average of the public sector rate and the general business rate. How those two are weighted can vary. And in fact, for Shelbyville, we gave more weight to the municipal county government data than we did the general business and industry data. Sometimes we weight them equally, but fairly commonly we'll weight the public sector data more heavily because you're not for profit, and it makes more sense to do that. So just be aware that we did that for you folks. Okay, the employee tenure adjustment, I think we did look at a more elaborate thing. This is kind of what we typically do. We set a target step for different amounts of time in job. So just pick, if you've got a person who's been in the job 5 years, they should be at least at step 4 in the step plan. If they're not, we would move them there. So with 12 years, should be at least at step 7. If they're not, we would move them there. This is typically what we do, and you can have more categories or fewer. You know, it can be as aggressive or not aggressive, however it fits the situation. What we did with you folks is we just did it simple like this. I think part of the problem was we didn't have time and job in the database. So we couldn't reliably apply a factor that was based on time and job. So we looked at time with the city and came up with this approach. This is in fact what we did. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you had 10 or more years in the job, you get an extra step. If it was 20 years or more, you get 2 additional steps. So it was, one might say it's a poor man's version of the more elaborate scheme here. Part of it was, maybe much of it was driven by budget. You know, this was too costly to do this. So as I recall, the city was somewhat behind. I think salaries were about 93% of market average. So there was, you know, some catch up to be done, and there were limited funds available to do that. So that's kind of what we went to the more simplified approach. Any questions? I went through that pretty fast, so I'll be quiet for a few minutes and let you formulate some questions if you have any. Yes?
Given the work that you've already done, would you have to start completely?
No. In fact, most of our clients are repeat clients. We would often do an update every couple of years, and sometimes, you know, we usually get called in about year 5, year 7 to kind of do a redo. But even then, we don't have to start from scratch. We've got everything in place. So it kind of depends on what's transpired in the city since we last did the pay plan. Some cities are pretty stagnant, others are growing like crazy, and others have had a wholesale change of department heads or whatever. So it kind of depends on the situation, but we wouldn't have to start from scratch. No, so it's not a complete redo.
If when given the green light, how long does this process generally take?
So there's a couple constraints. One, getting the data from those benchmark cities and counties. Sometimes that takes a while. We conduct our salary survey every 2 years. We do a statewide survey. We usually have about 100 cities and counties participate. We're doing that survey right now. So we've got data from, you know, if I get back to your set of benchmarks here, if you were to keep the same set, we've got data from almost all of these already. So we're good. It's fresh data. There might be a couple that we're maybe looking for, but I think we've got data from everybody. So sometimes that's a constraint time-wise. After that, once we get the data, it's pretty quick to move forward. The constraint is we're doing about 10 of these right now. So we can't get to it for a while. You know, we can probably get you something put together in April, but promising much before that would be tough, given our workload right now. But if you can work with a report, you know, results in April, we're good. So that gives you kind of a time frame. Normally it's a 3-month kind of a thing typically. And you know, if we're going to meet with department heads up front, we don't have to do that again because we did that last time, although things have changed. Maybe we do that, maybe not. So that takes a while to set that up, and we usually carve out a couple of days and come here and camp out, you know, and get that done. But once we've done that, we get the data, we pull together pretty quickly, and then it's a matter of working with you all on does this make sense, and do we meet with department heads again? Maybe not. But there's some back and forth feedback, revisions, etc. So if we were to start, you know, if you were to say, give us the go ahead now or shortly, we could probably get something in April.
And the last question I have is, what does this typically cost?
It can range based on what we do and the number of employees. The key variable is actually the number of jobs. The more jobs there are, the more data points we have to collect, the more analysis we have to do, more assigning of jobs to pay grades. So that's the big factor. So it usually varies from 15,000 to 30,000. For you folks, I think we're probably closer to 20. And depending, again, maybe we don't do all the things, maybe we don't meet with the departments up front, it could be a little bit less than that, but I'm gonna say ballpark figure would be probably 15 to 20. It would actually generate a formal proposal. Yeah.
I have a quick question in regards to positions that we have added that did not exist back in 2020, or possibly changing
Sure.
from a tech to a director, or changing
Right,
those types of
right.
things, that wouldn't be,
So what we would ask is any updated job descriptions
Right.
you have.
uh-huh,
Maybe it's just easier to send all of them to us. But yeah, we will, we have the matches we made last time all documented, so we would go in and make the same matches. But in the course of doing that, we would look at the job descriptions.
mhm.
We've talked to department heads, we'll get that input and say, okay, this job has obviously changed since last time, so these matches don't make sense anymore. So we have to, change how we match it to the market. So there'll be some of that. Yeah, so we would need updated job descriptions. It's probably easiest just to send them all.
That's what I was
Yeah,
thinking.
Yeah. Other questions? Yes.
I can see where some of those benchmarks need to be changed, because the discussion that brought up this pay study is primarily the police and fire, and the chiefs can say how many, but it seems like a Murfreesboro's, the Nashville's, the state of Tennessee's that are not on that list are the ones that are cannibalizing our certified.
Yeah.
About the time we get them certified, boom, they're gone.
Yeah.
So how do you factor that in, or suggest we
So,
factor that in?
THP, most sheriffs and police chiefs acknowledge we're just not going to compete with them. They're out there. So we very rarely end up having those in the database here. But to your point, if you're recruiting, and I'm sure this is true of other positions too, accountants and some of your professional jobs, they're going to consider Murfreesboro or Franklin or Brentwood or whatever. So, so maybe Murfreesboro needs to be in here. Franklin and Brentwood are different animals. They don't target the average. They target way above the average. So, because I do their pay study, so I know. So, it's hard for a city as far removed from Franklin and Brentwood as you folks are. You're not that far, but you're a bit of ways out, to justify to elected officials, which some of you are, that this is justifiable. But Murfreesboro, yeah, that's a pretty big public safety operation, both fire and police, and they're going to recruit. They recruit from all this, everybody. So that's your call as far as who you want in the database, or in the benchmark group. I think we had this discussion last time, as I recall. Murfreesboro was yay, nay, and I think we said no for various reasons. But there was some sentiment that Murfreesboro should have been in there. We're open to whatever you think makes sense. Maybe Cleveland doesn't make any sense anymore. We pull that out, put it in Murfreesboro, or leave Cleveland in there. I don't know. We're open to suggestions.
I think if we're speaking to Murfreesboro specifically, that would be, I remember at the elected level, there was a sentiment by several people that don't even talk about Murfreesboro because there's nothing that we can do to compete with them, where we are competing directly with them. And like my philosophy is, hey, if I could just stay, in range, it's not necessarily that we're trying to overtake, but if we can, it might not be worth driving an hour each way to work and doing all that for $3 or $4 difference, but it is for $10 difference, that just trying to stay close to that.
And by the way, if we do add Murfreesboro in here, it's not going to change the total number for the group a whole lot.
Rutherford's
Yeah.
competing directly with them too, anyway. So.
And they've been kind of bringing their pay scale up over the years. They were kind of behind. So, because we did their pay study. So, it's totally up to you. you know, like I said, this should represent your direct labor market competitors as well as some other matches that make sense on the basis of demographics. So if Murfreesboro is a big labor market competitor, probably needs to be in here.
Have you done any recent pay studies for any of these on the list?
Yeah, we're doing Spring Hill right now. We did Columbia a couple of years ago. We did Cookville 2 years ago. We did Lebanon last year. Tullahoma was a couple of years ago. Goodlettsville, I think we did last year. Louisville a couple of years ago. Manchester 2 years ago. Fayetteville, we haven't done Fayetteville. We did Rutherford County, kind of last year, and then Murray County a couple of years ago. So yeah, we've done a lot of these.
But Spring Hill you're working on right now.
Yeah. So, and that I always get that question, well, Steve, if we do this and the market changes, what do we do? Well, we do project everything forward. So we kind of guess what all these folks are going to do come July 1, 2026. And we kind of acknowledge it's a conservative guess. We don't want to overcommit your taxpayers, but we try to project, got fourth quarter 2025 data, what's it going to look like July 1, 2026? So after they've implemented their increases. So we try to project that forward. So yeah, it's a bit of a moving target. We try to capture where the target's going to be in July. What else?
So Scott, we're here today to maybe make a recommendation to the council to go forward with a pay study. Is that what we're?
Determine our next steps here.
I guess we ought to discuss it. I mean, what's
I think you already made the recommendation, I'm saying.
Yeah. Looking back to see, but I believe we did.
Yeah.
So what we can do is we can create a proposal or engagement letter, whatever makes sense, and outline, here's what we're going to do. Here's what it would cost. We'll send that to you, to Scott and Stacy, kind of in a draft form. So you can, we don't want to do this, we want to do that. You can tweak it to make sure it fits your needs and what you can afford and everything else. It'll finalize that, will be an engagement letter of contract, so to speak, and maybe that's what you bring to the full amount. But, you know, whatever you want us to do.
But we would have time constraints of, April will probably be all right as far as budget. But anything later than that, we'd probably be pushing up against it. Anything?
But you're gonna have a month or two just getting the contracts in place to get it to go.
Yes.
You're gonna be standing there shooting real quick.
Well, that was my thing there. If you guys are already doing Spring Hill, you probably got a lot of the data that you need to collect from those others.
Yeah, like I said, we've got data, I think, from every one of those.
So I think that part of the data collection probably go pretty quick.
And the contract on our end is, well, we send it right back, so there's no delay on our end.
Well, we know. It's always here.
Yeah.
We have done those public meetings.
Yeah.
Well, our goal is to do this in February, is that correct? So the council would vote on it on the 12th? Is that we're gonna have a study session
Yes,
on that?
yes. It is listed to be in.
Yeah, so if you've got the contract sometime,
Mid-February?
mid-February.
Yeah, we'd be good, because we're not gonna be able to get to it till then anyway.
Yeah.
We're just booked up, so.
And that would allow me time to make sure,
Yeah.
get with my departments to make
Right.
sure the job descriptions are
Yeah.
up to date,
Right.
that include
Yeah.
everything, the duties and whatnot, and get those.
Org charts, organization charts would be very helpful too, get those updated. So yeah, if we can get that to us and have a contract agreement by the middle of February, I think we can hit the April effect.
Our study session's the 3rd, correct?
Yes,
The meeting is, excuse me,
12.
it's the 12th, so, that would be conditional approval. If I hadn't seen the contract before then, council hadn't seen the contract before then, just remember that.
That's what I was fixing to ask, how long it would take for you to get a contract together for us, and how would you figure out how much it was gonna cost us, what information would you need for that?
I think I have everything I need, because I've got the stuff from last time, so I know the jobs and employees. So I think I have everything I need for that, so I can get that to you right away, next week, and we can tweak it as you see fit, and you can use that however you want, so.
As much information as I
Yeah.
have to take to the study
Okay.
session for the council to review
Sure.
would be helpful.
Okay, I can, that's the third, you say?
Yes,
Sure.
the study session is the third,
Yeah,
yes.
okay. All right,
And probably would be good if you could be here.
sure, think so. What time is that meeting?
We meet here Tuesday at 6. February 3rd at 6 o'clock.
Okay. Got it. I think I can do that.
And then some of these that I'll be sending you are newly
Okay.
created positions that have
Okay, that's fine.
not
Got
been
it.
filled at this point, so.
Okay. You think it would be helpful for us to meet with department heads again up front?
I personally would prefer that,
Yeah. Okay.
We have.
Yeah,
Upfront meetings.
I know I have,
It's been 5 years, so it probably, if it was last year, I'd say maybe not, but 5 years, yeah, it probably would make sense to do that. Okay. Anything else? Other questions? Yeah.
You did not do the Bedford County study that they did a couple of years ago. That wasn't your
No.
organization? No. Okay, just,
I did something for Bedford County 911, I believe.
okay, yeah, they had a pretty.
But yeah, that was separate, that was separate.
Just from the elected side of this, the concern that I know we're gonna get is obviously what this is gonna cost down the road. And I can tell you what their study did. It increased their payroll 30% in 1 year. And I know the city doesn't have anything like that in their budget. So I would like to see, and I think you did this the first time, a couple
Right, yeah.
steps of
Yeah.
different dollar amount implementations that we could look at. Yeah.
And they were, I think, pretty far behind. So.
That's what they said. That's why I
Yeah,
went out.
I would be
30% a
surprised.
year. But yeah, that led to a big tax.
Y'all have been doing some increases every year here, so I'm gonna guess you're in pretty good shape.
Closer than they were.
Yeah, but not that far off, I would say. Can't imagine that. What else?
Anyone have any more questions for Mr. Thompson? Okay, before we adjourn, let's just address general questions among ourselves. We'll get the agreement, contract to Lisa. We'll have discussion on February 3rd at the study session. Great time. Any other processes we need to address right now? Make the best presentation possible.
The only thought I had driving, I've been to Franklin this morning already. It's not that far a drive. This committee was formed in the beginning to look at the defined benefit plans and health insurance thing. And we've sort of taken this on as a pay study. Has council really been informed of what we're doing? I mean, we're gonna make a recommendation next week, the 3rd, but they want to get too far out over our skis on the committee. Got in trouble on that in the past, sometimes where the committee takes the ball and runs with it without informing the rest of the council. So that might be part of the plan for February 3rd, of what we take it. If some of them.
Yeah, I think,
pushback where we
discuss that at the study.
all of a sudden, why are we coming up with a pay study recommendation? You guys weren't supposed to do that, were you? So that was the only thing I was thinking in driving this morning back here.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea, because we didn't put that in the name of the, I mean, we kind of had the pay discussion in our thoughts, but we definitely didn't put it in the committee name. So I think bringing that to the council at the study session.
I think I recall you mentioned.
We did
it at
talk
one point,
about
but I
that.
don't know if that was
It
actually
wasn't in the
in
name.
the motion that made this committee.
yeah, I remember the meeting,
Yeah, we've been talking about it.
you talked about the three big ones, the insurance, the retirement and the pay.
And pay.
I think when this was brought up first as a committee.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I don't think it's a bad idea to reiterate it, make sure everybody's on the same page.
I'm planning on putting out a report tomorrow, so I can include it. Precursor.
And just on the, totally off topic, but back to the insurance, another positive note I had this week. we use Clements Dental, which is a fairly big dentist here in town. They actually reached out to me this week, heard that the city had switched insurance, asked for my new insurance information and said they're gonna accept it, so.
That's great. That's
Yeah,
good.
yeah, so they reached out, I guess, to all city employees that were already a customer and said they were good with it, so.
That's really good. I'm glad to hear that. Also, on the other note, I went and used our insurance at a specialist day before yesterday and gave them both of my cards. It was no problem. They have a policy that if you have two insurances, you don't have to pay your copay at the door. They will bill you for it once the insurance is processed, so it didn't cost me anything at this time. So, but I was a little nervous.
Yeah.
So I was glad to see that it went through real well.
But to speak to that though, I have had a staff member voice some concern. I guess she has, is it MMC?
From the Urban Clinic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where I was.
So she lives in Murfreesboro,
Yeah.
and she brings her kids there, and they do not do third-party file. So the process right now, unless she changes physicians, is going to be waiting for them to get the itemized bill, and then she's got to file it with
Zurich.
with the Zurich or whatever in order to get reimbursed. So right now, as far as I know, the MMC does not take that, will not file
Pediatrics.
any of
part
that,
it.
at least on the
That's-
pediatrics, because she has
Yeah.
two small children. So that's been a little bit of a thorn in her side on that. I just wanted to bring that.
Integrated. I thought they were integrated. Like
They-
they do everybody.
I spoke to the Zurich company and MMC and all of that this week. And they don't file any secondary insurance for anybody, period. They file primary only. And you do have to wait a month. So now I have a specialist there. My copay out of my pocket is $130. And I have to wait a month to get the itemized bill, then file with Zurich, then wait 10 days to get reimbursed for the copay. So if you have any doctors at MMC, that was the final word from Zurich yesterday.
Okay.
I just wanted to bring that to
Yeah, no, that's
everyone's
a differentiation. Yeah, Vanderbilt has been good about it, so apparently different networks are
Yeah.
handling it.
And I thought mine was MMC, but it might have been, it's actually called St. Thomas Heart, so I guess it maybe is under the St. Thomas brand and not the MMC.
They're separate.
Yeah,
Was St. Thomas making it?
yeah, they took it fine.
I want to bring up something. I'm not sure how many of you, I know I received an email from FMIG with their direct contact number where you could speak with a benefits counselor at any time, even if you are there at your physician's office and they're having issues. And from my understanding, you call that 800 number, you get someone on the phone right then, and they walk through, and they have, from what I've heard, they've been great in getting any questions worked out. You don't call, leave a message and wait for a phone call back. Nothing like that. What he reported to us during his presentation about someone being there and answering the phones is, from my understanding, if anybody needs that information, let me know, because I have sent it out to some departments, because they didn't know which way to go. I thought everyone got that email. So if anyone wants that, just let me know and I'll be happy to
Maybe
send
they
it.
need to talk to the billing people at MMC themselves.
They did.
They did, they will.
FIG,
Oh,
just Zurich.
Zurich. Well, I talked to an FMIG person and Zurich. Because FMLG got me the Zurich person. He listened to everything, and then Zurich called me, and then she called MMC. And then she called me back after she talked to MMC. And MMC said they don't do secondary for anybody under any circumstances. They do primary only. You have to wait and file your own secondary insurance.
So that's just their policy.
That's their policy, MMC's policy.
MMC's policy.
Mhm.
Yeah, they just don't do it.
You know, if that 800 number, 855 number is actually on the back of the Zurich card.
It
The
is.
number that they sent me was the FMIG number for the benefits counselor there. Because they're like, and it trickles down to whether it's the Zurich or the Renaissance,
Because
and
the
they'll,
ones and twos that I've had to deal with, that was the case, and you called them and they had Zurich and them, they were back within 5 minutes on it, you know, talking to you. Because a couple times it's just been XYZ person at XYZ doctor's clinic doesn't know what it is and isn't interested in trying, you know.
now the Zurich card is FMIG,
They've
it's,
got my email and stuff. I'm assuming they sent all my stuff to Deborah Phillips. Or sent it to me, not addressed to her. It'll be over.
I'll just, yeah.
Say it like it.
Any other questions, comments?
We will not be meeting next week.
Aw.
What you gonna do? You come down here and sit.
But, I don't know if y'all want to wait and see. I have sent information to, TCRS. And so they've had it since last Friday. I haven't heard anything back about, get back together, but we can look at meeting that first Thursday in February. And if something comes up, I don't have the information, I'll let y'all know. So I guess for right now, next meeting will be February 5th.
There's no further business.
Sorry, I just wanted to bring up, I know, circle back from last week. Chief Doak had asked me about the report that I had given during one of the staff meetings on how many new hires we had come through, and so I reran that report. So that means that they at least got here for orientation and filled out that paperwork. For 2025, it was 69 people. As of January 2nd of this year, at that time, we had 271 on our roster. So you're looking at 25%.
Turning over 25%, is that what you're saying?
And how many processed last year?
2025, 69. That includes only the ones that passed all of the required and showed up.
Probably more like 130 with the ones.
I've got some stats, like just not griping, it's just letting you know, especially if you're going to talk to other elected. We got 16 people on shift in suppression, and 18.75 have less than 1 year of service. That equates to 3 firefighters with 1 year of service or less per shift. I got 33.3% that have 3 years or less experience. So that equates to 5 firefighters of that 16 that have 3 years or less. 43.75% of personnel have 5 years or less experience. So that equates to 7 shift with less than 5 years experience. And 52.25% of people on shift have less than 10 years, and that's 9 per shift. So over that, 56.25%. It's that low. So that drops our average service to 10.46.
Stacy is working up a chart. I know she's putting PD already. And it's very enlightening. It's out and out about, our experience levels and this and that. So, Chief, if you would please share that with our HR manager, and let's start compiling some information on this, just better inform the committee and the city council as well.
How many years do you estimate that it takes to be a proficient firefighter out of that?
If I have someone brand new off the street, to get them, and like other people, I've only got so many times a year that I can put like rookie student. Like I have people that started last month that will get to go till next August. So, but it takes about 3 years, probably on average, to get them, because it's, like I said, it's fire, it's EMS training, the hazmat, all that to where they're, somebody that can operate with, 2 people with similar experience by themselves. So at a minimum, 3 years.
Just to get all the training.
Just to get all the training and get them where, I'm not saying cut them loose, but where they can, we try to at least always lead teams of 2, especially on medical calls for legal reasons, but it's going to take a minimum of that. And then by the time you go back and count not just the cost of the school or the, the curriculum and the tuition and all that, it's the hours and then having to cover overtime to fill their place on shift and keep minimum staffing. And by the time you accumulate all of that expense, it's tens of thousands, if not pushing $100,000 just to get somebody to that, just to get to that minimum level. And then, like you said, 3 or 5 years by the time they get it all, they're like, well, I want to pop smoke because I can go over here, run less calls and make more money.
And that's something, especially once we speak to the full council. This committee is called the Employee Benefits Review Committee. So, as the councilman said, we definitely, the focus is on health and retirement. And now if we implement into pay, is there any other type benefits to where after you train somebody up or you train somebody, you get somebody CDLs, they don't use us as a training and jump ship. Of course, I know pay is the primary motivator, but is there anything else that we may down the road need to look at?
You mentioned something about pay increases for different certifications and that kind of stuff, and I think that's something that we should be considering as well. If you're a CDL driver, if you've got your full licensure from on all these different trainings from the police or the fire, I think that there ought to be steps in there for those folks that hold those different educational levels. Regardless whether or not I understand that you have to have this certification in order to become a firefighter, but like you said, there's people that are working right now that can't go to school till August. Well, what are they doing right now? They're still doing something, right? And so they're getting paid, right? But they ought to see a bump when they've completed their school. For Bucks folks that have CDLs, like they ought to see a bump for a CDL. And it should be a bump that is significant enough to where they say, I want to go get my CDL because I want to be like that guy.
Well, and I think as far as the formation of the committee, whether we're staying on track, I mean, like Mr. Thompson said a minute ago, pay is a huge thing, but the benefits package is, in a lot of cases, it's as important, and so I don't think you can have a benefits review without doing a pay review, because I think they should reflect a medium off of each other to do the best, that we can. And I know just that it means a lot for employees for us just to be sitting here talking about it. So I don't think you can have a benefits committee without considering pay, and I don't think you consider the pay without the benefits.
I agree, our mission ought to be anything employee related as far as I'm concerned. I just didn't want to get some of those council members that happen to be in on the discussion.
Yeah.
Feeling like that, well, y'all left us here. Y'all were gonna do the insurance and the 401K maybe, but
So there's been-
how did you get into the pay study? How did you get into this? That's all my point was, don't want to get criticized down the road. Somebody says, well, I don't know what's going on with Henry and Johnny, do. You know?
That would never happen, Henry.
My point was like, maybe it's paid benefits. You know, just the name, the location.
I want to piggyback off of something that Chief said a moment ago. I have had conversations with employees through coming up, and the engagement that we have going with them right now, watching these, what, you know, they're watching these employee benefit committee meetings. And regardless of what ends up being approved and whatnot, I think at least there's an appreciation that everyone is sitting around here and going to bat for them. And yes,
And you asked the question, is there anything else that we should be considering? I know that we, as a city, already sort of give out accolades at the 5, 10, 15-year mark for employees in the way of holiday or more paid time off, PTO, or holiday pay or
vacation.
vacation. I was going to get there eventually. Should that 5, 10, 15-year mark come with any sort of pay adjustment as an incentive to keep people as a retention plan? I don't know if maybe that's something that should be discussed as well.
Well, that would be part of the step, though. You know, if we do the step plan, once you hit your 5 years, that's the step that you should be. So getting those extra years and everything, that would all correlate to that. I think that's all part of the pay. I think the certificates and everything else is part of the pay. You know, as far as retaining people, we could have great benefits and low pay. We're not going to retain people. We could have great pay and terrible benefits. We're not going to retain people. We need to find that happy medium of everybody around us. And I don't know how you do benefits without doing the pay part of it. I think these are the big three. I think the other things, you know, are more policy as far as employee policy, like comp time, those types of things. I think that needs to be worked on in policy. But as far as my gut feeling is the big three. This is what I think this committee is formed for, is to retain people and to pay them what they're worth.
I think the benefits help you. Having benefits, especially like new people, actually having a pension, that helps kind of retain from the private sector, because most private sectors don't offer that. And what helps us retain the public sector more is the pay, and, you know, and the plus the benefit. So with both of those things, that benefits just keeps rising back up, so.
Any additional questions, comments? If not, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion.
Second.
Second.
Vote.